Well, greetings to my church family. I'm sure most of you have heard the good news by now that if all things go well, we should be able to gather for corporate worship on June 21st. And so this year, even the mothers are looking forward to Father's Day. It should be a great day to celebrate. In the meantime, I want to invite you today to think with me about our re-entry process. You know, when we exited into quarantine, the instructions were relatively simple. Go home, right? And so everyone who could simply stayed at home. And there was this sense that we were all in the same boat together, right? It fostered a sense of community and togetherness. Ironically, the isolation actually increased the sense of community because it was a shared isolation. And so we were all in the same boat, right? We could relate to each other's fears and frustrations. There was a sense of connectedness, even though we couldn't be together. However, on our re-entry, as we reopen our society, I think the process is going to be far more painful because there are a number of complicating factors. The first one is competing concerns. Competing concerns specifically of lives versus livelihoods. And to listen to most of the rhetoric, you might think that we really are forced to choose one or the other. I just want to remind us that both of these are really a moral issue. Both are important, right? People need to have their health, that's important, obviously, but people also need to be able to make money and do meaningful work. And so figuring out how to balance these two competing concerns is neither obvious nor simple. But my primary concern in this fireside chat is not that we will disagree, but how we disagree. For example, those who are eager and ready to go back to work or reopen their businesses could be accused of being greedy or reckless or of putting profits before people. On the other hand, those who are not ready to go back yet, they don't want to go back to work, they don't feel comfortable going back to church, they could be perceived as being cowardly or even of abdicating their civil rights to a power-hungry government. But I would like to encourage us to think very carefully about how we talk to and even think about those with whom we disagree over these competing concerns, because it really is a rather complicated issue. The second complicating factor is different philosophies. As I understand the situation, the only way that we're going to get past this pandemic, there's really two ways. One is through a vaccine or through an effective treatment, and the other is through what they call herd immunity. Herd immunity refers to when you get enough people, a critical mass of people who have been exposed to the virus and have developed the antibodies to protect themselves and other people. So there are some individuals and groups and even whole countries in these two different camps. One camp advocates, hey, let's stay home until they develop a vaccine. And the other camp says, oh no, let's go out into the workforce and build up the herd immunity. Now, which camp is correct? Well, I think the jury's out on that one, and I think it will be for some time. A third complicating factor is the spectrum of comfort regarding exposure levels to the virus. There's a broad spectrum of comfort levels with just how much people are willing to be exposed to the virus. On the one end of the spectrum, we have people who maybe wear masks in bed at home, and they wear gloves in the shower. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have people that go to Dillon's and lick doorknobs. Okay, so maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it does demonstrate that there's a broad spectrum of comfort levels with different degrees of exposure to the virus. And wherever you are on that spectrum, I think there's a tendency, there's a temptation to look to the people on your far right and your far left with a little bit of suspicion and maybe even a little bit of contempt, right? You know, those people on your far right, those really cautious people, they're just crazy germaphobes who don't really have enough faith in God to trust him. And then those really casual people where they're just reckless and irresponsible. They don't really care about people. right? There can be a tendency to become judgmental towards others. That's another reason I think it's going to be rather complicated for us upon our reentry because of these competing concerns, different philosophies, and the spectrum of comfort in terms of exposure to the virus. Well, as followers of Jesus, I think he would want us to extend grace to one another during this time, perhaps an extra level of grace. As I've observed my own behaviors and attitudes and thoughts over the last couple of months, I've noticed that I've tended to shift from one camp to another in all three categories, sometimes in the same day. I also think it could be helpful to remember that there really aren't any true experts on this issue. None of us really knows what we're doing because none of us have been through something like this before. The last global pandemic was in 1918. And even those who are old enough to have survived the Spanish flu, they weren't old enough then to be real guidance to us now. So there really aren't any residential experts on this. Even our top health experts and government leaders, although they're trying to do the very best they can, they've never done this either. So they're kind of making it up as they go, just like the rest of us. So I think it's important to extend a little grace toward one another. We're all still in this together. We were when we went into the quarantine, and we're still in the same boat as we come out. But it may not feel the same because we'll have all these complicating factors causing differences of opinion. We'll be scattered, we'll be fractured, maybe even deeply divided, which only highlights all the more our need to extend grace and patience to one another during our reentry time. I want to leave you with these words of Paul. He said in Philippians chapter 2, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." I think that's a great word. In humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. So, my dear friends, until we meet again, love each other well.